Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on Thursday, the 28th of October. My name is Maggie Lennon and I'll start with the latest coronavirus statistics. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 3,395,343 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 2,760,799 have been confirmed negative, 634,544 have tested positive. There are 2,153 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test since yesterday, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 20 new reported deaths of people who've tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who've died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 9,119. This number only includes those who've died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 932 were in hospital last night, 58 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 o'clock this morning, 4,312,204 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination and 3,900,420 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 140,265 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. That's an increase of 165 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings. I'm afraid the winter bugs that have been doing the rounds have not avoided the Broadcasting Scotland family, and therefore there's no guest on tonight either in the studio or online due to illness. So I'm afraid it's just me, Maggie No Mates, just reading out the news. Young people will be the conscience of COP, and world leaders must act on their demand for urgent action to tackle climate change, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said. Addressing 400 delegates from 120 countries at the launch of the 16th United Nations Climate Change Conference of Youth, Ms. Sturgeon praised children and young people's activism across the globe, which had spurred on, challenged and inspired governments around the world. The First Minister said, "It is important that young people are represented at this summit. It is only right that you have a say in the decisions which affect you most. That's a simple matter of fairness. But your presence also gives the summit its very best chance of success. Your activism in recent years has spurred on, challenged and inspired governments. I can honestly say that you are the reason why, in 2019, Scotland became one of the first countries to declare a climate emergency. And your efforts are continuing to put this issue front and centre in your own communities, in your home countries, and on the international stage. The idealism, creativity, and sense of perspective that young people bring to this issue is a huge asset, and I think it will help to ensure a successful outcome to COP. You should not have had to become the conscience of decision makers around the world, but we will reach a better outcome if you are. We are determined that your voices will be heard." The SNP has said that the UK budget has left millions of Scottish families worse off, as new analysis confirms Tory cuts, tax hikes and Brexit will cost families hundreds of pounds. I'm sorry, my autocue has just failed on me there. I do apologise. There we go. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. Just to start again. The SNP has said that the UK budget has left millions of Scottish families worse off, as new analysis confirms Tory cuts, tax hikes and Brexit will cost families hundreds of pounds. The UK budget confirmed the Tory decision to slash universal credit payments by £1,040 a year. raise national insurance by over 10%, and scrap the triple lock on pensions, at a time when the OBR forecasts that inflation could exceed 4%. In post-budget analysis this morning, the IFS had said millions of people will be worse off next year, with average household incomes falling as a result of the Tory tax rises and inflation. The Resolution Foundation has said 3/4 of universal credit claimants will be worse off overall as a result of the Tory cuts. Its analysis also found that measures introduced by the UK government since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister will cost households on average more than £3,000 a year. Former Pensions Minister Sir Steve Webb has calculated pensioners will miss out on an average of £520 next year and £2,600 each over the course of the next 5 years as a result of the Tory decision to scrap the triple lock. OBR forecasts suggest Boris Johnson's hard Brexit will be twice as costly to the UK economy as COVID, hitting UK GDP by around 4%. Commenting, SNP Work and Pension spokesman David Linden MP said, "The UK budget has fallen apart under the slightest scrutiny. This damning analysis confirms the Tory government has left millions of Scottish workers, families and pensioners worse off as Tory cuts, regressive tax hikes and the soaring cost of Brexit take hundreds of pounds out of people's pockets." The chairman of the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, has warned that Brexit will be worse for the UK economy in the long run compared to the COVID pandemic. Following on from the budget, Richard Hughes stated that in the long term it is the case that Brexit has a bigger impact than COVID. Hughes added that so far the data that we've seen on the impact of Brexit, especially taking into account the fact that the new trading arrangements came in January, is broadly consistent with assumptions we had, which is that it would reduce our long-run GDP by around 4%. Separately, the OBR also warned that the UK's supply crisis has been exacerbated by changes in the migration and trading regimes following Brexit. Commenting, the SNP's Westminster Deputy Leader Kirsten Oswald MP said, "With the chairman of the OBR warning that the impact of Brexit will be worse on the economy in the long run compared to the pandemic, it is a dereliction of duty that the Chancellor failed to bring forward any meaningful financial measures to mitigate that impact of Brexit. The grim reality is that the Tory government's extreme Brexit deal has compounded the pressure that households were already under after a decade of damaging Tory austerity cuts, regressive tax hikes and stagnant wages. It has played a major role in the severe staffing shortages, empty supermarket shelves and the rising costs of goods and services we are experiencing across Scotland and the UK." The Federation of Small Businesses Scotland said that there were slim pickings for Scottish businesses in the budget, given Sunak's forecast of a 4% increase in inflation, and the Scottish Retail Consortium said there was little to reduce the actual cost of doing business here in Scotland. Scotland's small businesses are facing soaring energy bills, a national insurance increase, supply chain issues and labour shortages, but nothing was announced yesterday that would offset these problems. The UK government is only catching up with Scotland on business rates. The Scottish government had already promised 3 yearly re-evaluations from 2023, delivered relief for property improvements in 2018 via the Business Growth Accelerator relief, and offers the most generous relief package for renewable energy generation in the UK. Commenting, the SNP small business spokesman Douglas Chapman MP said, "This UK budget does nothing to address the problems facing small businesses in Scotland now. It has essentially left them out in the cold as they face supply chain issues, labour shortages a regressive national insurance increase, and rocketing energy bills. A strike by the RMT rail workers, which would have seen train services in Scotland cancelled during the forthcoming COP26, has been called off after ScotRail and the RMT union reached an agreement on a pay and conditions deal for RMT members. Shortly after yesterday's 5 p.m. deadline had passed, the RMT returned to the negotiating table with an offer which restarted talks and led to an agreement being reached around 8 o'clock yesterday evening. The terms of the deal include a 2.5% pay rise for 1 year, backdated to April, an agreement for additional time off for rest day working, and a one-off £300 payment for work during COP26. RMT General Secretary Michael Lynch said the deal was accepted unanimously by delegates. Scottish Government Transport Minister Graham Day said, "Following recent discussions, we are pleased that all 4 trade unions have now agreed to accept this very good pay offer on behalf of their members. We are proud to have brokered and funded a deal which gives Scotland rail workers a decent pay rise and improved terms and conditions, in contrast to the conditions for rail workers under the UK government." The UK government has complained about France's seizing a UK-registered boat in French waters and warned Paris against further retaliation in a rapidly deteriorating row over post-Brexit fishing rights. French Seas Minister Annick Girardin said the Cornelis Gert Jan, a scallop dredger, was escorted to the northern port of Le Havre overnight after its crew failed to prove it was allowed to fish in French territorial waters. A second UK-registered vessel was given a verbal warning. The action signalled France's determination not to back down in the row, a day after listing potential sanctions against the UK if there is no progress in the talks. They include extra customs checks on British goods from the 2nd of November and what was widely seen in Whitehall as a threat to cut electricity exports to Britain if talks fail. UK fishing grounds are amongst the richest in the North East Atlantic zone, where most of the European Union's catch is hauled in. France's actions appear intended as a warning shot to put pressure on the UK government to compromise at talks with the EU. The UK government complained that the French reaction was disappointing and disproportionate and not what we would expect from a close ally and partner. France says the UK has refused to grant its fishermen the full number of licences to operate in UK waters that France says is warranted. However, the UK government insists that it is issuing licences to vessels that meet its criteria. Additional customs checks on goods travelling between the UK and the rest of Europe risk disrupting trade flow before Christmas. The EU's executive body said it would continue talks with the UK and France in the coming days. The Cornelis Gert Jan skipper is under preliminary investigation for dredging 2,160 kilograms, or nearly £5,000, of scallops and could face a €75,000 fine. Its owners said that the vessel had a fishing licence and had been fishing legally. A 6-party opposition alliance that aims to topple Hungary's Viktor Orban in elections next year has pulled 4 points clear of the authoritarian Prime Minister Fidesz's party after electing a common leader, according to an opinion poll. The poll, published late on Wednesday, 10 days after the alliance chose a small-town mayor, Peter Marquis, as its prime ministerial candidate, showed support for the united opposition at 39%, compared with 35% for Fidesz and 23% who were unsure. Orban, whose combative brand of national conservatism has transformed Hungary's political and institutional landscape since 2010, will face a united front of normally squabbling opposition parties for the first time since he came to power. The alliance of Socialists, Social Democrats, Greens, Liberals, and former far-right parties will field a single joint candidate in all 106 of Hungary's constituencies, targeting what they argue is the regime's corruption, hypocrisy, and advancing authoritarianism. Previous attempts to unseat Orban have been driven mainly by big city liberal elite, but the ideologically diverse alliance hopes to capitalise on growing dissatisfaction with the Prime Minister in his conservative rural heartland. As such, analysts say Marquise, a 49-year-old father of 7 who describes himself as a conservative right-winger and practising Catholic, could prove a smart choice. A former manager for a multinational company, he has degrees in economics, marketing and engineering, and he has lived in Canada and the United States. He has built a nationwide following and a strong network known as the Movement for Hungary of Everyone, and presents himself as a palatable choice for both left-wing and conservative voters, with a competent family man image likely to appeal to undecided Hungarians. Scotland's railways are crucial to a green recovery from the pandemic that tackles the climate crisis, the Scottish Greens have said. The Scottish Greens have highlighted a new report from the rail unions which calls for an upgrade in Scotland's railways once ScotRail comes into public hands next year. The report makes several references to the Scottish Greens' Rail for All report published last term, which made the case for investment in decarbonising Scotland railways. Scottish Greens Transport spokesperson Mark Ruskell said, "This is a timely report from the rail unions which outlines how crucial the railways are to a green recovery. The cooperation deal between the Scottish Greens and the government commits to reducing car miles and car kilometres by 20% by 2030 to tackle Scotland's high transport emissions, and this will require growing our rail capacity. With over $5 billion of investment and a fair fares review already secured through our cooperation deal, and the franchise coming into public hands next year, we have an opportunity to build a people's ScotRail that serves our communities." A consultation on the Scottish Government's ambition to more than double Scotland's onshore wind capacity by 2030 has been launched. The proposals, first outlined in the cooperation agreement between the Scottish Government and the Scottish Green Party, are set out in a draft onshore wind policy statement. They would secure an additional 8 to 12 gigawatts of installed onshore wind capacity by 2030. Scotland currently has 8.4 gigawatts of installed onshore capacity. Additional capacity is possible primarily due to technological advancements in turbines, which are now larger and more efficient than many currently in use and coming to the end of their operational life. Speaking on a visit to Kipemure Wind Farm in Straven, Net Zero and Energy Secretary Michael Matheson said, "We need bold action to tackle the climate emergency. Onshore wind is one of the most cost-effective forms of large-scale electricity generation and is vital to Scotland's future energy mix as we transition to a net zero economy." Our draft onshore wind policy statement outlines the huge potential for this technology and assesses the significant economic opportunity of future deployment, particularly in light of our green recovery aspirations. I would urge everyone, from businesses to communities to individuals, to take part in the consultation to support the work we are doing to help secure a greener, fairer future for everyone in Scotland. Green Skills Minister Lorna Slater said, "The Scottish Government is committed to an economic recovery from COVID-19 that is both green and fair. The growth of the onshore wind sector presents us with an opportunity to secure further good green jobs. By acting now, we can set Scotland on a pathway to meeting our climate change targets in a way that supports a just transition and delivers opportunities for all. Farmers and crofters are to be supported to play their part in Scotland becoming a global leader in sustainable and regenerative agriculture. A national test programme will begin next spring with up to 51 million of investment over the following 3 years. The programme will support and encourage farmers and crofters to learn about how their work impacts on climate and nature, including offering financial support to carry out carbon audits and nutrient management plans. This will establish a clear baseline and options for action for all who participate. Through work with a focus group of farmers and crofters, the programme will also help understanding of how sustainable farming can be supported and rewarded in the future. This will ensure the right tools and support are in place when, from 2025, the climate and biodiversity performance of businesses will determine the level of agricultural support payments. In addition, the programme will put in place livestock data and performance systems for businesses in the beef sector, with the aim of improving both business and emissions performance. Rural Affairs Secretary Mary Goodjohn outlined the programme as she addressed the AGM of the National Farmers Union of Scotland, where she also set out the Scottish Government's vision for the future of agriculture in Scotland. Ms Goodjohn paid credit to the many farmers who are already taking action to address the climate and nature crisis. A couple of late news stories that have just come in. A landmark new bill to pardon former miners convicted of certain offences related to strike action in the 1980s has been published. The Miners' Strike Pardon Scotland Bill follows an independent review led by John Scott QC into the impact of policing Scottish communities during the 1984 to 1985 miners' strike. The review recommended that the Scottish Government introduce legislation to pardon miners convicted for certain matters related to the strike, subject to establishing suitable criteria. Following a consultation, that criteria has now been established and sets out that the pardon will be available to people convicted of certain offences such as breach of the peace and who were participating in strike action. The bill does not cast doubt on decisions made by courts at the time and does not quash convictions. And finally, the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn believes pressure is there for an independence referendum. Commenting on remarks by former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, who this evening told BBC Scotland's Drive Time programme that the pressure is there for an independence referendum, the SNP said that the current Labour leadership in Scotland were looking increasingly isolated in their own party, never mind the rest of the country. Mr Corbyn said, "I don't believe that it's a good idea to prevent people expressing a point of view and an opinion, and obviously this is what democracy has to be about." He added, "I'm strongly in support of people having their voice. Therefore, an independence referendum is something I believe will happen probably within a few years," he said. His comments come just days after the Unite boss, Len McCluskey, called on Labour to back an independence referendum, saying the party should wake up and smell the coffee when it comes to the Constitution. Meanwhile, the Labour government in Wales has launched a constitutional commission to examine Wales's future with the rest of the UK, which includes an independence option. SNP MSP Paul McLennan said, "There is a cast iron mandate for an independence referendum when the COVID crisis is over, as expressed by the people in May's Holyrood election. Anis Sarwar led Labour to their worst ever result in that election, and if he continues to side with Boris Johnson's Trumpian-style denial of Scottish democracy, Labour will only slide further into the abyss. And on that note, that's the end of the news bulletin for tonight. I'm sorry we didn't have a guest to discuss things with you. I'll be back on Sunday for the full Scottish. In the meantime, have a good evening. Good evening.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.